Hi everyone, we're on to the third round now of the spoke flower blanket. I guess some of you are only just joining me at this point, others are continuing on, and yes, I think I need a coffee top up. But anyway, back to the blanket. So now, out the way. You can make colour changes wherever you like with this blanket, and the pattern certainly accommodates for that. But I'm just about to commence on my second colour. Alright, so I'm looking for, of any of the three DC clusters, the first stitch of any of those. So I found one of those here. So I'm just going to make a standing double crochet, but you can do 3 chain if you prefer. It's really up to you entirely. And then I'm going to DC in each of the next 2 stitches. So now I've basically DC'd in stitches 1, 2 and 3 of a cluster, and now I want to do a front post stitch again over that third stitch of the cluster. So we actually work 2 stitches into that third stitch of the cluster, one's in the loops and one's around the front post. So now I'll just put the hook in underneath the post, working a DC over the post instead. So we continue along, just make sure you expose that first stitch of the next cluster. It can hide a little bit behind the post, so make sure you get the right stitch there. So that's 1, 2 and 3 stitches of that second DC cluster. And now we do a front post stitch over the third stitch. So what you do is continue to do the same thing around until you've done that essentially 10 times, because we're starting to make the 10 petals for the blanket. So I'll just continue around with that. Right, so now you can see we've completed that round, except for just joining the circle with a slip stitch, and same principle, so just into the top of the first DC and like that. Okay, now we're ready to move on to the fourth round. So I think this should be fairly straightforward, so I won't spend too much time. So 3 chain to count as the first DC, and then in the middle of what's now forming as a petal, we're going to do 3 DC. And then another DC. And then we're going to do a front post stitch again over the front post stitch from the previous round. So now when you do front post stitches, you'll always be doing them over a front post stitch from the previous round. In this case, it's going to be a front post double crochet, but that will change in subsequent rounds. So again, I just pull that side to side to expose the next stitch. So we're doing a DC, 3 DCs, 1 DC, and front post stitch. So it's kind of handy at this point in time to get familiar with where the middle of the petals are. You can probably see here now with this second petal that I'm starting to make that this stitch in here, the middle of the 3 DC cluster is actually the middle stitch of the petal, and you'll be able to follow that through as you make more rounds, and that will help guide you with where you need to make stitches for each of the repeats. I tried to, I guess, simplify the pattern because the repeats are fairly generic, and once you get the hang of it, you really don't need to read instructions anymore. So to save on some, I guess, reading and some ink, I thought it's probably easier to just make them generic for when we get into the repeating rounds. That does mean though that obviously you need to be able to identify where the center petal is, but that's pretty straightforward. So I'm just going to continue around now. Right, so now I've completed 10 petals and I've slip stitched into the first, the top of the 3 chain that I used to start the round. So now I've completed 4 rounds, and then from this point onwards, there's actually a 3 round repeat, a no increase round, and then 2 petal increase rounds that work slightly differently, and there are variations of those as well, and I actually prefer to do the standard petals first, and then as the blanket gets better, to do the more rounded petals, because it looks really pretty to finish off with the rounded petals, especially if you're making it in really girly colours for a girl. Yeah, so we'll get back and I'll make another video for the rounds 5 to 7, which are the start of the repeat rounds.